My name is Thomas Laycock, and today I will be presenting to you some information on the potential psychological effects of anabolic steroid use. We all know that there are numerous physiological changes that occur when someone is taking anabolic steroids, but it is not often described or discussed what can happen to us psychologically. Today we'll talk to you predominantly about the negative psychological effects, as these are the most prevalent. We will also delve into the potential, if any, positive psychological effects that occur from anabolic steroid use. Before we continue, we must first discuss anabolic steroids themselves. What are they? To understand anabolic steroids, we must first understand testosterone. Testosterone is a male sex hormone that stimulates the development of sex characteristics and the growth of muscles and bones. We can take from this that anabolic steroids are synthetically developed from testosterone. Anabolic steroids are then modified to enhance the anabolic actions of testosterone that they are first developed from. Steroids are generally used by athletes to increase muscle mass and athletic performance. Apart from these physiological changes, there are also multiple psychological effects that occur from steroid use, both positive and negative. Whilst it may be unexpected, not all the psychological effects of steroid use are negative. A study conducted by Vassallo and Ulrich in 2010 examined 39 male participants, 33 of whom were former Division I athletes competing in either American football, baseball, basketball, track and field events, or wrestling at the collegiate level. To determine the necessary data, the participants undertook an interview process. From this study, 37 of the men using anabolic steroids perceived the period they were using as very positive. Aside from the physiological benefits, the participants had an increased sense of positive well-being. This perception of well-being hints that there are possibly positive psychological benefits when on anabolic steroids. One of the participants was quoted saying, "I was amazed with the way I felt mentally. I was on top of the world. I never realized that these things would make me feel like that. That is the best feeling in the world. I want that feeling back." This feeling was not only expressed by one participant, but several were found to describe an almost euphoric mental state. Another benefit that was found to come upon the participants whilst on the cycle was large increases in their perceived levels of self-confidence. One of the men quoted, "It was absolutely amazing how my confidence levels just soared through the roof." Feelings similar to this were expressed by the majority of participants, who all felt substantial increases in self-confidence. This self-confidence was found to relate to successful on-field performances from the athletes, as facing opponents or challenges, the men were considerably more confident that they would succeed, which led to such results. There is one psychological state experience that I've determined as a positive, and that is the feeling of invincibility. The feeling of invincibility is strongly related to that of self-confidence, but it differs slightly. One of the participants stated, "I was just invincible. I felt like I could do anything I put my mind to, and 9 out of 10 times, I did." How self-confidence and the feeling of invincibility differ is slight, but still enough to warrant it as another separate psychological benefit. Whilst the feelings of self-confidence gave the men the feeling that they would be successful, invincibility goes again to the next extreme, with the feeling that it is impossible for you to fail. As this is outlined, whilst use of anabolic steroids is considered negative, there are still positive psychological benefits that can be found within the use of the substance. I'll now discuss with you the more prevalent negative effects associated with anabolic steroid use. There are several negative effects that are found to accompany the use of anabolic steroids. These include depression, anxiety, and uncontrollable bouts of aggression. Depression is typically associated with the cessation of the steroid cycle, as a dependency on the euphoric feelings is developed, and when this is stopped, it leaves the user in a bad state mentally. A study conducted by Hayes, Littleton, and Stilner in 1990 found that a steroid user of 9 months was mentally unable to stop taking steroids. Whenever he attempted to stop using, he had cravings for the steroids associated with the euphoria experienced whilst using, and massive drops in self-esteem, leading to strong, unmanageable bouts of depressive states. This dependency is developed to the steroids is one of the major negative psychological effects experienced with steroid use. The feelings of depression that are felt by conducting a steroid cycle are incredibly detrimental to the mental health of the user. There have been more cases where a depressive state brought on by steroid use has been found. Brower, Blow, Beresford and Fueling in 1989 found that one user was incapable of stopping his steroid use without professional help because of the severe levels of depression that were brought on, which would lead to suicidal feelings. These two cases, along with many others, show that whilst the intentions of the user may all be positive, the potential effects brought on by a dependency has the potential to be life-threatening. Depression is only one of the negative effects found through the use of steroids. Another of these is aggression. Increased levels of aggression would be the most widely known side effect of anabolic steroid use. The levels of aggression because of substance use are not preconceived and differ from person to person. Some users of anabolic steroids have no indications of increased levels of aggression, while some users are at the other extreme and their levels of aggression become uncontrollable. A study conducted by Beaver, Vaughan, DeLisi, and Wright in 2008 found that males who had used anabolic steroids at least once in their lifetime had a greater involvement in violent behavior incidents comparatively with those who had never used anabolic steroids. They also found that those who had used steroids in the previous year were significantly more violent than those who had not. Another study completed by Lafave and Gilmore in 1990 found that psychological changes and aggression were the most commonly reported alterations involving anabolic steroid use. Following this, they determined that steroid use is associated with more frequent bursts of anger, of greater intensity and longer duration, with a more hostile attitude towards each others. Individuals reported this as a shift in behavior resulting in more hostile and aggressive incidences that are often accompanied by violence and a lack of self-control. The information portrayed from these studies show that another major psychological effect of anabolic steroid use is in fact major increases in the user's aggression. These aggressive tendencies can lead to a host of problems, be it social, home life, or even impact the work environment. The last of the negative effects I would like to talk about is that of anxiety. Along with the other detrimental effects, it has been determined that anxiety is another of the major psychological results of anabolic steroid use. Pope and Katz, conducting studies in 1987 and 1988, determined that these symptoms could be labelled chronic anxiety. If something is chronic, it is constant. Then from that we can determine chronic anxiety as anxiety that the user feels on a continuous basis. This continuous anxiety is incredibly detrimental to someone's health, with constant stress levels like that hard to cope with. These levels of anxiety have been found to lead to the inability to cope with stress, short attention spans, depression, and in severe cases, schizophrenia. As I have just listed, the potential mental deficiencies that can occur from these raised anxiety levels are extremely unhealthy for the psychological well-being of an individual. The potential negative effects associated with the use of anabolic steroids should be an indicator of how unsafe and unhealthy the use of these drugs can be to the mental health of an individual. From the information I have shown to you, it should be obvious that there is an extremely large array of psychological implications associated with anabolic steroid use. It can be seen that whilst using the drug, the user does experience overwhelming positive factors, with these extreme feelings of euphoria, self-confidence, and invincibility. The downside of these feelings is that the user tends to form a dependency on these feelings. And when the use of the drug is ceased, it leads to a large array of psychological effects, with the most prevalent of these being large amounts of depression, to the point that some users are unable to stop using because of the depressed state it's causing. The users then need to seek professional assistance in successfully stopping the use of steroids. Not all the effects experienced whilst taking the steroids are positive though. The extreme levels of aggression that are experienced whilst using lead to an unusual amount of angry outbursts, irritation, and general hostility. Along with this, users tend to become incredibly anxious, which can lead to a whole other host of psychological issues. I hope my presentation has been helpful in showing to you some of the most prevalent, positive, and negative effects that are experienced whilst using anabolic steroids. The next 3 slides detail the sources used to back up the information.